Good morning. I have three very important announcements before our second keynote lecture starts. The first very important announcement is welcome to all again. I'm very pleased to see that so many of you are still here. If you survived yesterday evening and found the right place, then everything else is very easy. The second announcement is from the field of religious studies. There is a very interesting sect, new sect, what one can see in Tartu. They are wearing blue bags, name tags, and some of them even have bought €5 cup with some strange symbol, what resembles eternity, but it is kind of with disruption and continuity. If you have a name tag, but you haven't signed, or you haven't given your 3 drops of blood, then please, after this session, go downstairs and sign the paper. It is very important. Otherwise, you will not get official dinner if you have ordered this, or you will not have a chance to present your paper. And there are some other punishments as well. Then the third announcement, and I don't know how to do it because I was told that these who are sitting on balcony on sides, they don't hear me, but they are the ones who should hear me, because if you don't hear me, then just move back and you will hear. There is special things with acoustics in this aula. And then I have 3 more announcements, but I will tell them at the end of the session. My great pleasure is to introduce our next keynote speaker, Zvi Bekerman, whom I met in Joensuu, and he impressed me with his thought-provoking lecture, but at other times he teaches anthropology of education at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and his main interests are in the study of cultural, ethnic, and national identity, including identity processes and negotiating during intercultural encounters in both formal and informal learning contexts. And I will not take more time from Zvi. Please, the floor is yours.
You should, if at all, applaud at the end, not at the beginning. Otherwise, you raise expectations, and that's not good. Now, one of the threats and true dangers if you don't sign your name downstairs is that you cannot attend this session. So now that could be a blessing as well. Anyway, I have 60 minutes starting from now. Hopefully I'll take less. I want to thank those that invited me. I truly do not understand till today why. You deal with important issues, religion. I don't. I have sympathy for the subject. I'm interested in it, but I don't do research on it. Only very recently I've started something that has to do with religion and civic education, but I won't talk about that. Anyway, it's not my fault that I'm here, okay? It's not that I pushed myself into this situation. I just said yes because there was no reason to say no. Okay, so I just participated in a session by the semioticians. They are fun. They're tremendously intelligent. They mix things. I keep learning from them endlessly, and I'm planning to stay throughout in their sessions. That's it. Okay, they told me to do like this. Okay, this is the questions that we were all asked, and they appear in your website. They're truly outstanding questions. I have answers for all of them. Hopefully the answers will become apparent in my presentation. If they don't worry. You can come and ask me, and I'll give you the true answers to them. That's not a problem. This is the regular way I usually introduce myself to try and prevent stereotyping. I know I wear a kuku, I'm dressed in a certain way, and that already stereotypes people, but this is a more neutral way of introducing myself. I suggest you all do that. Life can become better in the world if we forget about people being German or Israeli, because, as we all know, Germans and Israelis do not exist. And now we get to the title of the presentation, and of course the affiliation, because they pay my salary, and it's just correct to have them on. They won't be paying it for long because I'm retiring soon. They'll be paying my retirement, which is okay. I mean, that's nice. And now I'll start. And everything is written, so follow. My English is not too good, so if you want to understand what I say, hopefully the writing is okay, okay? And if you see any mistakes, say nothing about it. I'm Argentinian born, which means I'm from the south, and you know that Southerners are a bit primitive. But my father was Polish. Not much better, but I mean, a little bit better. I took lot to come from Israel yesterday. Respect for my father, his memory, and of course for the motherland. And they came in 4 hours late. I won't do that again, but don't tell my father about it. You deal with religion, and some of you might think you can tell him something, but I'm not sure about that. Okay, in any case, here we go. Oh, I forgot my presentation. I need to read it myself. There we go. There we go. Okay. So, originality is one of the basic expectations of modern control of subjectivity. Please do not expect any. We will be presenting a non-enlightened and non-romantic ethnographic approach to the production of identity and culture while introducing you to events in the lives of teachers and of children in conflict-ridden communities engaged in peace and multicultural education. But I think I need to rephrase. We will be presenting a non-enlightened and non-romantic ethnographic, that is to say, humane, approach to the evil national production of identity and culture while introducing you to events in the lives of teachers shaped by nation-state powers and of children in conflict-ridden communities engaged in peace and multicultural education. But I think I need to rephrase one last time. We will be presenting a non-enlightened and non-romantic ethnographic, that is to say, humane approach to the evil national production of identity and culture while introducing you to events in the lives of teachers shaped by nation-state powers and of children, soon to be shaped as adults, something not necessarily to be happy about, in conflict-ridden communities engaged in peace and multicultural education. We ask you to be careful when paying attention to our arguments, for we have a tradition, a view, a position, a preference you need to know about. Why is this jumping? We believe we are empiricists. Let me see if this... wait. Okay, no. Okay. Let us see if this works. Within this context, I want to make mention of my Jewish background. Such mention is made out of the sensibility towards the multiple theoretical perspectives that in the last decade of the 20th century have pointed at the relevance of the researcher's sociocultural and historical trajectories in the performance of any research activity. This sensibility should be doubled in the case of this study, which is conducted in an area engaged in one of the most intractable and intense conflicts of modern times. We're told ethnic, national, and religious identities operate in the lives of people by connecting them with some individuals and dividing them from others. Still, individuals negotiate their identities while constituting and being constituted by them. Though in present conditions my Jewishness might be a given, it is of course not. I want to believe that throughout my many years of life experiences and theoretical training in a variety of socio-historical perspectives, I have come to at least be able to sustain a critical perspective on myself and the circumstances of my research. This has never been an easy task. Suspicion, self, and others has been everywhere. Thus, in addition to my own reflective and critical position, I have made sure throughout the research process to be assisted by figures, Palestinian research assistants, fully identified with those groups who might not have an initial trust in my ethnic national cultural presence and have offered all interested the option to express themselves in the presence of these or other figures and the language of their choice, be it Arabic or Hebrew or anything else. Ultimately, I found a Palestinian parent that wasn't ready to speak with me Arabic or Hebrew. He only wanted to practice his Spanish. So, Jewish and under suspicion, and yet an empiricist. As such, we like being devoted to the study of the natural world and the improvement of the conveniences of life, as suggested by the Academy of Sciences as early as 1654 in France, and we are committed to the Royal Society of London for improving natural knowledge, motto nullius in verba. Take nobody's word, not even mine. And yet, we know things are more complex, even when you are an empiricist in the social sciences. It's not moving well, right? Stephen Chaffin has this wonderful book entitled Never Pure, Historical Studies of Science as if it was produced by people with bodies situated in time, space, culture, and society, and struggling for credibility and authority. Our studies are never pure, yet we think methodology is still of essence. It jumps, right? It does jump. I'm telling you, it jumps. The social sciences are fuzzy sciences, not in good shape, somewhat like biology was in the traditional sciences, and yet there are some good reasons for this. In towards a new philosophy, let's jump in, of biology, Observations of an Evolutionist, Ernst Mayr, the author, responds to the critique of the natural sciences on the fuzziness of biology, saying, "What do you expect? What we study moves." Educational research, as the one we do, deals with things that move too. That's why we are always in trouble. A few words on being non-enlightened and non-romantic are in place, mostly as these touch on the relevance of language in social research. There is no choice but to take language seriously when trying to understand that which is human, if only because humans see in language one of their main tools to manufacture reality. The sophists, Protagoras, Georgias, Hippias, Prodicus were right. Plato got it wrong. Forgive me, Plato. Rhetoric and language do. Cogito does not. The cogito, the great invention of the Enlightenment and the none less invented, creative, self-forming subject of Romanticism, destroy our understanding of words and language as tools of construction. Language and its use, rhetoric, is decentered and marginalized, leaving in center stage an enlightened, certain, and romantic, authentic self, able to lie or unable to understand the empirical production of reality. As you can see, we think cognitivism got it wrong. We do anthropology, perhaps the most humane today, only today, of the social sciences. Its most important contribution is being the science of the anecdotal veto. Through facts. But what are the facts? For Pirandello, facts is like a sack which won't stand up when it is empty. In order that it may stand up, one has to put into it the reason and sentiment which have caused it to exist. And yet, we might be empiricists, but we're not positivists. Working as we do in the anthropology of learning or education, we have for long been convinced that the customary scales and graphics produced by the social sciences offer poor representations of that which we study, of that we should try to understand. I'm drinking water. Thus, our scientific product should be considered in the way Conant posits science to be, an interconnected series of concepts and conceptual schemes that have developed as a result of experimentation and observation and are fruitful for further experimentation and observation. The process also involves abandoning the hope of finding fast solutions or writing praiseworthy bureaucratic reports. It involves acknowledging the intricacies of human interaction and networks, the intermittent nature of meaning-making, and the necessary exuberance and efficiency of all transcription and translation. It involves using the revealed complexities as a lever to humble our perspectives when confronting multifaceted realities. In short, we're saying that acknowledging complexity means acknowledging context, and acknowledging context means acknowledging noise, the one thing that frightens psychological experimentation. Evil is the refusal to acknowledge complexity and the basis for most policy papers and much research in education. These are very pertinent issues when conducting research in the social sciences in general and in education in particular, and we ask you to keep them in mind as we proceed with our presentation. Take, for example, one of those crude social science concepts, identity. You ever heard of the word? You use it at times. A term about which critics have said that the social sciences and humanities have surrendered to it at both intellectual and political costs. A concept which tends to mean too much or too little or nothing at all, if only because of its sheer ambiguity. Or when tied to nation state, a term which has flattened into a single plane a complex topography of heights and depths. We all should wonder how a concept meaningful as a math property which states a plus 0 equals a, or a times 1 equals a, 0 being the additive identity number and 1 the multiplicative identity number, or meaningful as a chemical reaction whose products are chemically identical with the reactants, has become the psychological inner essence of I or us or them. Though we should, time does not allow to review the long Western Occidental history which has attached this concept to self, individual, and person, the terms without which modern identity has no reality. Self, a peculiar term which the Oxford English Dictionary reminds us that in the 1680s was affiliated with Antichrist and anti-God in the world. Individual person, no less peculiar term about which Gertz reminds us that the Western conception of the person is a bonded, unique, more or less integrated motivational and cognitive universe, organized into a distinctive whole and set contrastively, both one against others, such wholes, and against the social and natural background, is, however incorrigible it may seem to us, a rather peculiar idea within the context of world cultures. So what, you may ask? Well, the problem is that identity fails to recognize the multiple complexities, political, social, emotional, that are present in processes of intergroup contact, and it hides the multiple relations of power in which these complexities are immersed, relations that cannot be explained by simply attributing them to issues of identity and/or culture. Oops, we mentioned a new concept, culture. A concept not less complex and surprising in its historical evolution, from the Latin cultura culturae, to work, as in agriculture, to today's prison of for groups and the individual in them. The problem is not anymore the individual, but his/her culture. And things become more complex when you realize that culture seems to be the word that took the place of all good race in modern English. Just see the results of Google Ngrams for race and culture. As you can see around the 40s, okay, culture moves up, race goes down. Clearly, no human can live outside of culture, but then no human does. To say that no human can live outside of culture, however, is not to say that they have to live inside a particular one forever. Hopefully, we can all agree that cultural belonging should not be to humanity what species belonging is to animality. Identity and culture seem to be an inseparable couple. When they fit together well, such as, for example, with the identity of a gentleman and English culture, you're set for life. If your identity is Muri or Anangu and your culture Aboriginal Australian, you're set to yes, for life, but a bit differently. Identity and culture love each other, and the social scientists love them both. Fortunately, there are other options, other imaginations. Gregory Bateson asks us, suppose I'm a blind man and I use a stick. I go tap, tap, tap. Where do I start? Is my mental system bounded at the handle of the stick? Is it bounded by my skin? Does it start halfway up the stick? Does it start at the tip of the stick? But these are nonsense questions. The way to delineate the system is to draw the limiting line in such a way that you do not cut any of these pathways in ways which leave things inexplicable. If what you are trying to explain is a given piece of behavior, such as the locomotion of the blind man, then for this purpose, you will need the street, the stick, the man, the street, the stick, and so on, round and around. Carbo states who am I depends partly on where I am, with whom I am, and what I can ably do there, in that scene, with those people, given the material and symbolic resources that are available to the people there. The primary ontological site of identity is then not solely psychobiological, although these might turn out to be active features in some scenes. Who I am from this vantage point depends upon both actual scenes and sequences of living, and what I become as I interact through these situated communication practices. These different imaginations of identity reflect our position. Identity is not a given in the individual mind, but a product. Identity is not a property or quality of mind, but a practice performance in the world. Seeing it as such means that our inquiry should lead us not to the inner borders of individual minds, but to the outer spheres of human interaction, in our case, the interaction which takes place in educational settings and among educational agents. In short, we move identity and culture from being nouns to becoming verbs. In conflict-ridden societies, identity and culture become even more salient. Crowds, Tommies, frogs, Japs, kites, Hajis, Moors, and plenty of other derogatory options essentialize the human which can now be slaughtered. These slurs reflect the assumed unquestionable existence of an inner self, and the unquestioned existence, or should we say, pre-existence of human groups and associations. In short, the group, Jew, Greek, Palestinian, Turk, Estonian, and even German, and its culture has been reified and are to be carried by a self, an identity which has been essentialized. We argue that when all these elements are not accounted for in education in general, and in our case in peace educational efforts in particular, or multicultural education, they risk fixing that same reality they intend to overcome. We suggest that reconceptualizing identity and culture then will help us overthrow the bondage of psychologized perspectives and situate our efforts in the realm of practice and activity. Some things about the schools that I have researched. The Palestinian-Jewish bilingual schools in Israel were all founded on the aspiration to create an educational framework in which Palestinians and Jewish children are educated together for social equality and justice, and the inequalities and tensions between the Palestinian and Jewish communities are addressed and challenged. The schools aim to equalize the power relations between the two groups within the school walls and to promote social change in Israeli society at large. In line with this agenda, the Palestinian-Jewish schools strive for a balanced representation of the two groups, not only within the student body, but also amongst the teaching staff, particularly in the classroom. The latter goal led to the unique co-teaching pedagogical practice at the schools where an Arabic-speaking Palestinian teacher and a Hebrew-speaking Jewish teacher teach alongside one another in their native languages. While there is no official segregation of the public schools that serve the Palestinian community from the general public education system, a state policy of spatial separation between Palestinian and Jewish populations led to the geographic partitioning of Palestinian public schools from Jewish schools since Israeli statehood in 1948. This marginalization of Palestinian education reflects the ongoing socioeconomic, cultural, and political discrimination of the Palestinian minority by the state. The first Palestinian Jewish bilingual school, Neve Shalom Wahad El Salam, was founded in 1984 by a Palestinian Jewish parents in a small cooperative village of the same name, which was founded by Fray Bruno Hussar in 1972. It opened only with one multi-age class with 11 children. The village was founded to demonstrate and realize peaceful coexistence between Jews and Arabs, and who sought to open a school that promoted and enabled this vision in the framework of their children's education. There are currently 8 Palestinian Jewish bilingual schools in the Israeli public education system, operated by 3 different organizations in 8 different cities and towns, and serving approximately 2,500 students in a variety of nursery, preschool, elementary school, and high school programs across the country. Now I'll give you some excerpts from my 14 years of videotaping, taping, interviewing, all what I've done in the schools. Very few of them, just to make a point, hopefully, about identity and culture. The Integrated Palestinian Jewish Educational Bilingual Initiative I consider in this forget it. Just at the end. I focus on the central issue burdening the field of multicultural and peace education, the problem of ethnic and national group identities and cultures. Different models for intergroup contact have been developed. These models reflect diverse negotiations between 2 poles of identity and identification. The first one encounters with a high emphasis on individual identity and a low emphasis on national ethnic group identification. And the second one encounters with a high emphasis on national ethnic group identity and a low emphasis on individual identity. At the bilingual integrated Palestinian Jewish schools, educators and parents have chosen a model that emphasizes both individual identity and national ethnic group identification. The following examples, taken from my longitudinal ethnographic study in kindergarten through 4th grade, exemplify the emergent ways in which identities are treated by the school communities. In interviews with parents, they expressed a concern that the school might threaten their children's ethnic national identities. A Palestinian parent explained, "We want our children to get to know about and be sensitive to the other and to be and remain Muslim." A Jewish parent referred to the central idea that to bring the 2 people together, they have to be strong in their own identities. Teachers often express the need to support the goals stated by parents. "I'm not asking to turn the school into a religious school, but I would like to strengthen the Jewish identity of children," said one Jewish teacher. Palestinian teachers express similar views. The wider context is mostly Jewish, so we have to be careful not to allow the weakening of our students' sense of identity. Because of parents' and teachers' concerns regarding the children's proper understanding of their own national religious and cultural tradition, some curricula and ceremonial events were segregated. I took water again. For example, separate ceremonies were held for Memorial Day and the Nakba. children were not encouraged to attend the other group's ceremony. When one of the Palestinian children persistently requested and was ultimately allowed to participate in the Jewish commemoration ceremony, his father in a later interview stated, "I knew where I was sending Isam, but when hearing what had happened, I was shocked. I did not expect my child would do something like this. I need to think about the future." In the kindergarten, our recordings clearly showed that the children, regardless of their ethnic affiliation, exhibited the same affinity to Palestinian and Jewish teachers. The children approached and hugged their teachers and followed directives, regardless of their teachers' ethnic identities. Even when discussing theological issues, alignment was not along ethnic or religious lines. For example, Ari, a Jewish boy, asked his friend sitting near him, a Muslim, a Christian, and another Jew, "Who believes in God?" Then he immediately added, "I don't believe in God because I believe we came from the monkeys." The Christian Palestinian boy Basil answered in agreement, "Me too, I believe we came from the monkeys and do not believe in God either." All the children reacted with agreement to this statement. We had the opportunity to ask, what does God and monkey mean? But I won't get into that. It's a fascinating story. Even when children recriminated each other, they never invoked ethnically denigrated innuendos when naming the guilty party. This is not to say that children have no consciousness of or respect for their ethnic religious affiliation. In fact, they have an awareness and even feel free to play with their identities. For example, on one occasion, Ulfat and Nadia, two Palestinian girls, were playing together with Noah, a Jewish girl. Ulfat told one of the researchers that Noah is an Arab, to which Noah responded by saying, "She's lying, I'm really Jewish." After this, they all laughed and continued playing cards undistracted. They loved joking with the researchers. Children knew exactly what we wanted, and they would be ready to give it to us without any problem. In another example, Chaim, a 9-year-old Jewish boy, was well known for his efforts to fast with the Muslim students during Ramadan. All the children knew him as an exception, but he did not seem to suffer from negative peer consequences for his decision. That said, teachers usually actively marked Chaim's behavior. When the Palestinian and Jewish teachers blessed the children in the morning with the traditional Ramadan Kareem, they added, "And to you, Chaim, too." There seemed to be a double play in these short statements. By drawing explicit attention to Chaim each morning, they seemed to actively mark the fact that there was one Jewish exception to the unsaid rule against crossing identity borders. On the other hand, this comment demonstrated a liberal perspective by offering active recognition to the choice of the child, who in this case preferred to cross such a border. Teaching religious festivals creates similar difficulty. El, a Jewish teacher in first grade classroom, was conducting a short introduction to the Passover Pesach festival. Until this point, the children had been referring to the festival by its name without linking it to a specific group's culture. This pattern does not mean that the children did not know its connection to Judaism. Instead, they did not mark it in their discourse. The Jewish teacher was the one who emphasized the Jewish-specific nature of Pesach. Who chooses to celebrate, celebrates, but it is a festival of the Jews and not a festival of either Muslims or Christians. Data regarding national events reveal similar observations. When discussing Memorial Day in the third grade classroom, the teachers drew two windows on the board to represent the different perspectives which the group and individuals within them may have concerning the historical accounts related to the holiday. The teachers opened the discussion and were the main speakers for the larger part of the class session. Each teacher presented her own version and understanding of the events of the 1948 war and its reasons and its consequences. The two teachers presented their accounts in a careful way, respectful of the other, but with difficulty and guarded tension, which were clear from the frequent hesitation and self-corrections in the way they expressed themselves. For example, Mem, the Palestinian teacher, said, "I see this through this window, that there was a country here. Palestinians lived in all the areas. Suddenly came the Jews, and they came and told them, you must go out of this country. This is not your country." This approach contrasts to that of the students who presented their views, which for the most part reflected the views held by their own group within the general Israeli society, in a respectful way, acknowledging the existence of different narratives belonging to different national groups. For instance, a Jewish boy said, "I can look through both. I go every year to the Nakba Memorial too. We can divide each window into two, no problem." A Palestinian girl, "I want to say why I don't want to participate, because the ceremony is not for us. It is for the Israeli people and the Jews that remember it, not us." The difference between the teacher's discomfort marked by long pauses and the student's ease could be attributed to the teacher's heightened awareness of the social and political nuances and implications of the topic. Thus, while the teacher's side-by-side discussion of Memorial Day conveyed more unifying messages, the manner in which the teachers led the discussion may exemplify how they use language as ethnic identity marker. It may also suggest that ethnicity is organized through differentiation and practiced as a separatist activity. Differentiation is achieved as the students witness the teacher's unease or tensions in talking about national and ethnic issues. Our interviews with children showed that they are aware of their teachers, that their teachers find it difficult to discuss national issues. For example, a Jewish girl observed, "They only speak about these issues, national issues, in special events and not throughout the year." And a Palestinian boy said, yes, "There were Arabs here first, and then came the Jews and conquered the land. Some Arabs hate Jews and the other way around. But here in the school, Arab and Jews were like brothers." A last example, the Kabbalat Shabbat, the welcoming of the Shabbat ceremony, is one of the minor rituals performed weekly in kindergarten and the lower grades of primary school in regular segregated Jewish schools. The term Kabbalat Shabbat refers to the traditional section of the prayers that ushers in the Shabbat on Friday evenings. In the early grades of Jewish schools, the ceremony takes the shape of a rather short ritual, which serves as socialization into Jewish customs as well as a concluding ceremony for the school week. It should thus come as no surprise that the bilingual school, in their first year of activities, and not yet having developed curricula suited to their own particular needs, saw it as natural to continue this tradition for the Jewish children in first grade. At the beginning of our research project back in 1998, some Palestinian parents expressed concern about the unequal number of Jewish and Muslim or Christian festivals. On multiple occasions, they mentioned teasing that Jews have too many festivals. This justified sense of imbalance was shared by the Palestinian teachers as well, who repeatedly stated that in Jewish primary schools they have Kabbalat Shabbat every week, and many other festivals. We need to find a way to balance the situation. The solution to the perceived imbalance involved the creation of a new Muslim tradition. If there are any Muslims in the room, keep this in mind, okay? Though Muslim tradition has no day of rest like the Jewish Shabbat, Friday is a special day of prayer in Islam. The new ritual invented was that of Kabbalat Shishi, receiving Friday, not Shabbat. A special short ceremony to be conducted on Thursdays at the end of the school day. The Kabbalat Shishi ceremony involved the preparation of traditional sweet Arab pastries, storytelling about the Prophet Muhammad, and the singing of Arabic songs. The format of the ceremony was a replica of the traditional Kabbalat Shabbat ceremony, which also included the preparation of pastry, the singing of songs, and telling of stories. More interesting, however, is that the Arabic name given to the event by the Palestinian teacher who initiated this tradition was Saad al-Eid, the festival hour, But this name was never able to overcome the isomorphic symbolic power and ultimately did not adhere to the event which became referred to by all as Kabbalat Shishi, a clear rhetorical attempt to counterbalance Kabbalat Shabbat. At first, the idea was a sweeping success. Not only were the Palestinian parents happy, perceiving the event as one more act of recognition and respect for our national history and cultural traditions in ways unknown in regular Arab Israeli schools, but Jewish parents were also pleased that their children would be exposed to this in this way to Palestinian culture. The ceremony was held on Thursdays during the first year of the program. However, by the time the research team arrived on the scene during the second year of activities, the teacher who had established the ceremony had left Jerusalem to work at the school in the Upper Galilee. After her departure, the ceremony, as she had designed it, ceased to exist. None of the other teachers in the Jerusalem school took upon themselves the continuation of the tradition, and a new effort at ritual symmetry took the form of a change in the traditional Kabbalat Shabbat ceremony. Kabbalat Shabbat was renamed Sof Shavua Sameach, the Happy Weekend ceremony. The traditional Kabbalat Shabbat took on a particular new hybrid form, syncretized to include some Arabic songs and stories, and the Arab pastry unfortunately disappeared. This effort was only partially successful. The new name never really stuck to the ceremony, and our records show that for the most part, teachers refer to the ceremony by its traditional Jewish name, Kabbalat Shabbat. And only after a joking correction by one of the other teachers present would they call it by its official name, Sof Shavua Sameach. The idea of total ceremonial symmetry at the Jerusalem school had been officially abandoned. Any such invented tradition is too dependent on personal initiative and commitment, which, if not fully supported by the wider cultural system, will fail. While the effort to balance the initial asymmetry might be laudable, serious approaches to multiculturalism cannot afford artificial creations. Culture, even when not reified, is the product of historical interactional processes, which, if not accounted for, might end in parody, not a good recipe for intergroup respect and recognition. In general, the attitudes of adults and children seem to reflect very different approaches and understandings of the constructs of identity and culture. Adults are concerned with when children do not demonstrate awareness of their denominational or national identities, captive to hegemonic perspectives of essentialized identities. Children, not yet fully socialized into the historical realities in which they live, they do not seem to hold to an understanding of identity as a boundary marker. For teachers, dealing with national and religious issues is a complicated task. These topics are never dealt with as information, but as central ideological elements of a curriculum with a declared twofold goal of supporting integration towards coexistence and safeguarding and strengthening individual identity and sense of belonging to each original group. The children might easily relate to and learn about a variety of ceremonies, festivals, texts, and other cultural or national artifacts. Teachers, however, seem always to try to ensure the individual children understand to which group and tradition they are connected. Identity then is treated in an ambivalent fashion. The teachers simultaneously reify the idea of clear group differences while implicitly sanctioning a student's choice to traverse the identity border. Theoretically, these positions warrant exploration. It has been argued that racial or ethnic identity research has failed to adequately address the importance of situational context and in relation to identity development. Researchers have pointed towards situational characteristics, traditional meals, festivals, family celebrations, etc., as being responsible for fluctuations and feelings of ethnic salience. These findings lead to debates about the extent to which school leaders should highlight or obscure race, religion, or ethnicity in educational settings and about what form such salience or dimness should take. Historians, sociologists, culturalists, and even psychologists have argued, thank you, only one person is paying attention. So that's totally clear. Historians, sociologists, culturalists, and even psychologists have argued that conceptions of identity are the key building blocks of the most universal of modern structures and ideologies, the nation state and nationalism. Schools are the main technology developed to achieve this ideology. Teachers, though involved in initiatives geared towards interrupting these othering processes, are still heirs to everyday practices that persist in their immediate context and make it difficult to escape from particular forms of nationalistic socialization. They have come of age in circumstances that support the formation of an us and them mentality accomplished through myth-making, which idealizes one's own group and demonizes others. In this sense, they have grown accustomed to settings in which there is no recognition of diversity. The lasting question that lies at the core of this research, and indeed any research on identity formation and issues of difference, prejudice, and conflict, is whether schools and teachers are really in a position to model for children the backgrounding of ethnic religious identity and culture when the context of the nation state actively foregrounds it. When trying to answer this question, we ask you to imagine a child approaching a teacher and asking, dear teacher, they don't use the word dear anymore, but what is a Jew or what is a Palestinian? The teacher may be inclined to offer it as a response some culturally descriptive and benevolent characteristic of the groups in question. Okay? They're nice, they're intelligent, etc. This response might seem appropriate for those working in peace and multicultural education initiatives. However, we believe that such a response reinforces rather than challenges the basis on which interethnic conflicts developed in the first place. A better answer would be a correction of the epistemological basis that, though potentially unknown to the child, substantiates his or her question. Thus, a more appropriate answer might be, Palestinian Jews are not a what, but a when and a how. What we suggest is a move in educational practice away from epistemologies that emphasize the notion of reified and abstract views of identity, the only thing that epistemology seems to do. Instead, we argue for understanding identities as negotiated definitions that recognize individuals as co-participants in complex socio-historical political context. This keeps jumping. We recognize this step away from what and towards when and how as necessary, but not entirely sufficient, which means I try not to be an idiot. Putting an emphasis on the constituted nature of identity does not offer solace in conflict situations where deep suffering arises from rigid labels of identity that create a marginalized status with very real consequences. Telling a black child that black is constructed is not a solution. That is clear. Okay? We need more. Maybe telling him that Obama is black but is not, that might be a solution. Okay? We need more. We need to allow the social to predominate over the ideological without ignoring the power relations involved, which often make the social and the ideological difficult to distinguish. We need to help our children become ingenious about the ways in which social categories are constructed and engineered by nation states. We need to teach our students to become critical artists of design, explorers who uncover the ways society is organized and have the knowledge and skills to envision alternative designs. Helping our students expose the ways present societies are organized entails making visible the flattened, psychologized topography of identity theorizing, while helping them recognize the crucial influence of nation-making structures in the shaping of individual and group identities. Finally, we want to suggest two main directions for future work. The first relates to the need to seriously research children's subculture and the ways in which they organize the world through more flexible identity categories than the ones dictated by present national paradigms. The second relates to the need to consider how these new understandings could influence curricular undertakings. Sustaining children's culture is a possibility adults need to consider. Sorry. And thank you. Sustaining children's culture is a possibility adults need to consider, especially if they offer openings for overcoming some of the greatest ailments that trouble our society and are conducive to engaging in tractable conflicts. Science, the social sciences, should not assume that people are dead, nor should it help to choke them to death with identitarian and cultural categories that do not reveal the rich lives and struggles of all who appear to be alive. George Hutchinson, in Facing the Abyss, American Literature and Culture in the 40s, recently published, says, championing gay or lesbian identity as such was rarely the point of the work of gay, lesbian, or queer-oriented writers. What they did was to attack homophobia and the need to label people according to their desires or sexual practices. And this critique surprisingly often connected with related explicit critiques of racism and anti-Semitism. Identity politics is what fascists and anti-Semites practice, what homophobes practice, what white supremacists and segregationists practiced. Again and again, the intersection of such attitudes, how they interlocked, as James Baldwin would put it in 1949, emerged in the work of the 40s. Interpretation, description, should precede categorization, not the other way around. It took me 4 years to understand that inasmuch as I knew in advance who was a Palestinian and who was a Jew in the school, I would learn nothing about life. And it took me 2 more years to try and get rid of knowing who was a Palestinian and who was a Jew to start describing the complex world that I was looking at. Okay, it's a worthwhile effort. It doesn't get you published too much. Okay, so you have a session on publishing, so be careful. But if what we want to understand is the world, let us describe it properly first, instead of adopting categories that people offer us, hiding what they hide. We had another title for this presentation, which we introduced now when leaving the floor. What happens when adults find solutions to problems children do not have? Thank you, but there is a danger in applauding in academic encounters because it makes us appear as if we were actors, that we are. but we don't want to say that, right? Aloud, at least. Now, I'm sure somebody brought them in here. I was surprised to see them at the table, so for the sake of the publishers, because they don't pay us anyway, but they're there. These are 2 collections. You write a book because you want a full narrative. So the aspects related to multiculturalism, education for peace, etc., and the descriptions of the schools are in these two books. One, Teaching Contested Narratives, and the other one, The Promise of Integrated Multicultural and Bilingual Education. And part of what I'm saying, though much less, is represented here, but the theoretical background of the critique can be found in this more recent book, which is called Psychologized Language and Education, Denaturalizing a Regime of Truth. Some of you can hear the hint for Foucault, but of course it's our creativity. Yeah. And the last one, now you should applaud. There you go.
Thank you, Zvi, for this very thought-provoking and humorous presentation. And especially thank you for giving us time for discussion and for comments or questions from audience.
Mostly comments.
Yes. So I have from our sect the most dedicated person, volunteer, with blue shirt, not only blue bag. And please, she loves to run. Please use microphone.
Professor Bekerman,
yes.
I deeply appreciate this absolutely brilliant presentation.
Can you repeat that?
I will. Now, I have been involved with the schools. I'm a sociologist, but I've been involved with community schools. But I'm not talking about community school. I was on a visit to Los Angeles, and I saw my cousin asking me that the children from the school, her children, came back because the teacher asked them to bring some cultural artifacts to the school. So my cousin asked me, because she thought I'm the knowledgeable one, PhD sociology, what should I do? And I couldn't figure out, because we are from Bangladesh. This is a part of Bangladeshi diaspora in America. And I said, I frankly don't know what are our cultural artifacts. But then she came up with a solution. She said, we are Muslims. So maybe I should send something that would reflect our Islamic identity. The reason I'm mentioning this, because when you say this identity, whether it is ethnic, linguistic, religious, political, economic, whatever syncretic, synthetic, local identity, the identity itself that comes to the fore, it itself so multivalent, multidimensional, and complicated. How do we resolve that? How do you tell us to resolve that complexity?
In the third book that I showed, the one on the psychologized language of education, I try to offer some suggestions. The main suggestion is called linguistic therapy. And the second one is the re-ontologizing of everything. But linguistic therapy is needed because most of us have been raised in a language which has been naturalized for the sake of us using it. So we don't think about it too much. And the language itself, mostly in the West, or the languages I know, has no choice, almost, but to emphasize identity and culture as being things. So I think we should give up on them. And the social sciences, they've gone totally crazy. Not all of them, of course, none of those sitting here. But they are writing, losing all criticality towards the main concepts that they use. They assume them to be natural. This has been said before within the context of, let us say, methodological nationalism and other type of critiques. But we cannot go on adopting categories that are given to us without being analytical about them and calling ourselves people that are trying to deal with complexities in life analytically. So I don't have much more what to say. I just love the example. And always remember that within educational systems, national educational systems, schooling, it's always cheaper to offer a good cultural curriculum with food and artifacts and arts, okay? It's much, much cheaper than to restructure the society in an egalitarian way. And the World Bank has gone crazy. They send to Burundi psychologists to deal with the problem of trauma. Okay, they kill each other, they have nothing left. You sit in psychology. You have to, I don't know, I just can't understand it. So I don't have a solution. I have some ideas that language is a big, big problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Irina Pert from the University of Tartu. When my son, who attends Estonian school, gets asked by his friends, are you Russian or Estonian? So he learns to answer, it's complicated. So that's another way to answer it. And my question is actually about power. So you've kind of deconstructed identity and culture. What about power? So, I mean, like, how these schools, which I understand are quite experimental, how they're funded, you know, who decides what curriculum, you know, how teachers are selected and all that. And also, these students, like, are they, like, how they are selected and which strata they come from? So just...
I'll tell you a little bit about that. Yeah, that's what you want to know a little bit about. Yeah. So, look, you know which is the best predictor of success in education? The best predictor of success in education worldwide. Okay? Worldwide means OECD, okay? It's parents' income, okay? How much money do your parents have in the bank? Now, it's a little bit insulting to say that because we all believe to be individual geniuses that have achieved through hard individual work our status. Well, it's not the way it is. Now, the second predictor is the level of education of the mother, which basically is the same as the first. Okay? So you have a redundancy, which is not bad for good research. Okay? And that's the way it works. Now, so a good student is a rich student, a poor student is a stupid student. Okay? There are no cognition problems. Okay? There are money problems. Why do I emphasize this? Most special schools belong to the middle upper classes. And this school is no exception. Of course, in these schools, you will find exceptions. You will find people that do not belong to the same strata that participate. But they, of course, are never the majority. So that's one point. Now, within the educational complex system that we have, which has nothing of being a apartheid system, but it has multiple outcomes as such, okay? We have separated educational systems for Palestinians, okay? The Arab educational system. Jews are separated into religious system and secular system. Then you have an independent system for ultra-Orthodox Jews and Catholic schools. That's the way it works. They all get supported by the state. The level of support depends on the amount of curricula, state curricula, that they implement. But the least that is supported is the independent school, the ultra-Orthodox Jewish and the Catholics, because they implement very little of the state curricula. But they get 55% support, which is a lot. So in a sense, you have a fantastic multicultural system of education, which is a big mess. And anyway, So this school is supported within the secular Hebrew-speaking Jewish system. But it is supported with the same amount, which means that the schools, if they want to keep 2 teachers per 30 children, need to raise the money to pay the second teacher. Okay, so they're paid, they are supported in the same way. They are not recognized as special schools, no. Okay, so that's a problem, so much so that most of the schools today only have 2 home teachers, a Palestinian and a Jew. The rest is divided among uni-language teachers, or Palestinians or Jews. One of the fantastic things that happened when I was back at the beginning of the year 2000, in one of the schools, the Jewish Hebrew-speaking teacher was sick for a long time. And the replacement came in, and it confused everyone, because the replacement was a Palestinian teacher whose subject was Hebrew teaching. So it was a fantastic example, and people didn't know what to do because they knew if they would open their mouth, it's racism. Okay? But where is the balance? Okay, the balance should be a Palestinian and a Jew. Okay, so things like that happen. Have I answered all the ones? No, if you're missing one, just tell me, I'll remember. It's okay? No. So. And we have 2,500 children, I said, in 8 schools. It won't grow too much. It won't grow too much. I don't think so, no. And there is a 10% of Palestinian children in regular Hebrew-speaking secular schools. And they all belong to the elites. Because the elites realize that caring about ethnicity doesn't help too much. Okay? If you want to survive within certain systems, you better accommodate. That doesn't mean that you have to assimilate, but you accommodate. Okay? I'm not happy about those systems, but that's the way it works.
Thank you, Zvi. We have at least one question more. Yeah.
Hi there. Thank you very, very much. I really value your talk. And I had 2 questions. One question is, you've created a sense of these schools as schools which both go against and replicate the nation-state system in which they are, and in which the children, as small children, have very little trouble with the problems of adults. But I'm wondering what happens with the children as they enter adolescence and become adult. Do they then become absorbed into the communities from which they come? They just have had a little bit different education? Or do they also push against it? And then the second question that I had was, at the beginning you said it was a non-romantic talk. And yet the call for people to learn from the children is, of course, a deeply romantic one.
No, it's right.
Yeah, but because I think there's a difference between a kind of saccharine romanticism, right? And so I think you are, a hidden optimist and idealist, and I wanted to see.
No need to insult, okay? So I have my own tradition, and it's not idealism, okay? You see, I always do this. I forgot the first one, but it was important. What was it? Just remind me the beginning of the first question. Yes. What happens as they grow? So look, the answer is very simple. As they grow, they become adults. That's the problem.
Where does your romanticism come from?
No, first of all, I'm not a romantic and I'm not an idealist. But I realize that what I'm suggesting has no chance within the present political economical system. So what can I do about it? I think that people like me, there are many others, of course, we're trying to keep a tradition alive by telling people stories and showing the problems we see, till the circumstances get somewhat organized to allow some change. Changing is very, very difficult. Israel recently has passed the new national Jewish law, which is just sickening, okay? And it's going to get worse. Okay, it's not going to get any better. So I'm not a romantic, and I have no dreams. But I realize that here and there I have students and teachers whom I work with, fantastic teachers, that at their own level truly understand these things and would like to do something differently. And it's very difficult because there's a contextual sea pressing them, okay, to stick to the norms, okay, and that's the problem. So I don't have much more to say than that. Just keep a tradition alive till the world gets somewhat differently organized to allow for some of these ideas to be implemented. It's not crazy, by the way. They could be implemented. And by the way, I'll tell you, I had 2 students doing work with Palestinian students studying in regular Jewish schools. And the results were fascinating. They were tremendously happy at the schools. They liked the way they were treated. They liked everything. They liked the education they were getting. It's much better than the Palestinian schools, not because Palestinians are bad educators, but because the country is organized not to allow Palestinians to have good education, that's all. So they were tremendously happy there. What bothered them? They said, why can't they tell our story as well? And tell you the truth, come on. The Israeli government, as most governments, is tremendously intelligent. That's why they let people like us alive. Okay? If you're stupid, you kill them. If you're intelligent, they are useless. We're useless. We do nothing. But it would be so easy, and I keep telling them at the ministry, look, just tell the story of the Nakba as a different story. Children are not idiots. They know how to manage these complexities. Okay? Just do it. They won't do it. And this is nothing revolutionary. So it could be done with ease. It was done for a few years under certain ministries of education. Sorry, that's it. For what it's worth.
Thank you. And we should stop here.
They should have a long break, This is a conference. We should have fun.
Yeah. We should stop with questions here. If you have more, we have lunch time. And before we go to lunch, I have 3 more announcements. In your schedule, Friday afternoon, 4:30, there is written terrible words, General Assembly. And I was asked to say that it is for all the members of national associations. It's not for freaks. So everybody is invited. The second announcement, the lunch will be served not only in this courtyard, but also at Jacobi 2. And there are much less people. If you are not interested in queuing for an hour, you can think about alternative way. And the third announcement is have very interesting and thought-provoking day, and please be in time.